Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily English Podcast. We're so excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Today we're diving into something super important, phrasal verbs.
Right. You might be wondering, why are phrasal verbs such a big deal? Well, they're a huge part of natural English. Native speakers use them all the time, almost without thinking.
Exactly. If you listen to native speakers, you'll hear phrases like figure it out, run into, or get over. But non-native speakers often use more formal words like understand or meet by chance.
Yep. And while those words work, using phrasal verbs makes your English sound way more natural. It's like adding a little extra flavor to your speech.
For sure. Native speakers use them effortlessly. It just makes conversation sound more casual and easygoing. But for non-natives, phrasal verbs can feel tricky, so they often stick to formal words.
And that's exactly why we're here today. We've got 8 super useful phrasal verbs that will instantly make your English sound more natural. These aren't just random expressions either. They're common phrases that pop up all the time in everyday conversations. And if you master them, you'll definitely sound more like a native speaker. So, let's jump right in.
First up, figure out. This one's super common, and it's a great one to know. Basically, it means to solve a problem or understand something after thinking about it.
Yeah, like when you're trying to figure out why your phone isn't working. Or maybe you're dealing with a tricky situation with a friend. It's all about solving or understanding something in a casual way.
Exactly. If you're a non-native speaker, you might be more likely to say determine or solve, but those words sound a bit more formal. Phrasal verbs just make things flow better.
Totally. Let's say you're talking about a puzzle. A native speaker would say, I finally figured it out. But a non-native might say, I discovered the solution. It's not wrong, but it just doesn't sound as natural.
Right. And figure out isn't just for problems. It can apply to emotions and social situations too. Like, I can't figure out why my friend is upset.
Yeah. Or something like, I need to figure out what to do next. It could be solving a problem, making a plan, or just understanding a situation.
Another common mistake non-natives make is saying discover the solution instead of simply figure it out. Remember, it's all about sounding natural.
Definitely. Let's try a quick example. If I say, I can't figure out how to get there, what would you say?
I'd say, yeah, it's tricky, but you'll figure it out. See? It's super natural and easy.
All right, moving on to the next phrasal verb, end up. This one's really useful and has a cool meaning. It's about finding yourself in a situation, place, or condition, often unexpectedly.
Yeah, like when you plan to go somewhere, but something unexpected happens and you end up somewhere else. It's like saying, this is where I ended up after everything.
A good example would be, we planned to go to the beach, but we ended up going to a park instead. It's not about finishing something, it's about where you find yourself after a series of events.
Right. A lot of non-natives might say something like, eventually went or finally arrived, but end up just sounds more natural. It adds that unexpected twist.
Totally. Like, we ended up staying an extra day because we missed our flight. It's not about completing something, it's just what happened as a result of the situation.
Exactly. And let's not forget the common variations. Ended up doing, ended up going, and ended up staying. You'll hear those a lot.
Here's a fun example. I thought I'd end up at a big party, but I ended up just chilling at home. See how end up adds that unexpected outcome?
Yeah, and the vibe is much more relaxed than just saying, I finally stayed at home. It has that element of surprise or an unplanned event.
So if you're talking about your own experiences, you could say, I ended up going to bed early last night. It's a smooth, natural way to explain what happened. All right, next up, we have run into. This one is perfect for when you meet someone unexpectedly. It's like a casual surprise encounter. Yeah, it's not like you planned it. It's more like, oh, wow, I just ran into this person. Like when you're walking down the street and suddenly see someone you know.
A non-native might say, I met them by chance, or I encountered them, which sounds fine but a little formal. Run into just flows better, like you're casually bumping into them.
Yep, it's got that laid-back vibe. You might say, I ran into Sarah at the store yesterday. You're not setting up a meeting, just mentioning a random, unplanned encounter.
And it's so much more natural than saying, I met Sarah unexpectedly at the store. With run into, you're emphasizing that surprise factor.
Totally. And this is usually for casual encounters with people you kind of know, like running into a neighbor or a friend you haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, you wouldn't say I ran into my boss because that's more of a planned meeting. Run into is really for those surprise moments.
Exactly. So if you're ever at a cafe and see a friend you haven't talked to in ages, you could say, "Oh, wow, I ran into John here." It's just simple and you're not making a big deal out of it.
And the cool thing is, you can also use other expressions like bump into or come across. So you might hear someone say, I bumped into my old teacher at the mall. Same meaning, just another way to say it.
Oh, and here's one that's a bit of fun. I ran into a problem last night with my Wi-Fi. You see how you can use it for situations too, not just people?
Yep. You could say, I ran into a few issues with my car, just to show those unexpected challenges. So many ways to use it.
All right, moving on to a tricky one. Get around to. Now, this might be a bit unfamiliar to some listeners. So let's ask you all. Does it mean to go somewhere or put something in somewhere? What do you think, Steve?
Good question. I think most learners might guess it means something like go somewhere, because get around kind of sounds like that. But actually, it's not about going somewhere. It means to finally do something you've been meaning to do.
Yeah, it's like you've been planning to do something for a while, but for whatever reason, you just haven't gotten around to it yet. So you finally get to it after putting it off.
So it's more like you finally do something after a bit of delay. Instead of saying, I finally have time to do it, you could just say, I finally got around to doing it.
Yep, it's perfect for those tasks you've been postponing. Like, I've been meaning to clean the kitchen all week, but I only got around to it today.
Totally. It's like saying, I eventually managed to do it, but in a much more casual way. It's not like I did it because I had to. It's just that you finally made it happen.
You see how it's not negative, but it still shows that you took your sweet time? And it's really useful for things that are on your to-do list but keep getting pushed aside. Like, I still haven't gotten around to watching that movie you recommended.
That's a good one. And it's also a bit different from just finishing something. Like if you say, I finished my report, you're done. But getting around to something is about that delay before you finally do it.
Oh, and here's a common mistake non-natives make. They might say something like, I arrived to do the task, but that's not quite right. We don't say arrive in this context. It's always get around to.
Good point. So remember, it's about doing something you've been meaning to do, not about arriving somewhere. It's like you're finally taking action on something that's been hanging over your head.
Yep, and this one is great for everyday stuff. I still haven't gotten around to calling my mom today. Simple but sounds so natural.
All right, let's dive into the next one. Put off. Now, this might sound like you're taking something off, like removing something, but here's the twist. Put off doesn't have that meaning at all.
Yeah, I can see how learners might get confused, but actually put off means to delay or postpone something. So you're not literally taking anything off. You're just pushing something to a later time.
It's often used when you're putting something aside for later, especially when you don't feel like doing it right away. Like if you have a deadline coming up, you might put off starting your project until the last minute.
Oh, I've definitely done that. Like, I keep putting off doing my laundry. I swear it's got that little sense of reluctance.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like saying, I'm avoiding it. It has that slightly negative vibe, like, I'm not eager to do it, but I have to eventually.
It's not just about pushing it aside. There's this feeling of not really wanting to do it. Like you don't really want to do it, but you know you'll have to get it done. So you could say, I put off making the decision for too long, and now it's really stressing me out. You're delaying it, but it's causing some stress.
Yeah, and you'll often hear phrases like, putting it off until tomorrow. It's that classic, I'll do it later excuse, but there's always a little bit of guilt tied to it because deep down, you know you should have done it earlier.
Totally. It's like a procrastination classic. And I think it's more common for non-natives to use formal words like postpone or delay, but put off is just so much more natural and casual.
Yep, that's the magic of phrasal verbs. They make everything sound so much more relaxed. Like instead of saying, I delayed the meeting, you can say, I put off the meeting. It's way more natural. And one common mistake people make is saying, I arrived to do something. But nope, with put off when we're talking about delaying, not showing up to do something.
That's a great point. So to wrap it up, put off is all about procrastinating or postponing, usually with a bit of reluctance. And don't forget common collocations like putting it off until tomorrow, or don't put it off any longer.
All right, let's talk about come up with. This one's pretty cool because it sounds so much more natural than formal alternatives like create or generate.
Yes. You'll hear native speakers using come up with all the time when they're talking about thinking of ideas or solutions. It's like you're not just creating something, it's more about thinking of something.
Right? It's like when you're brainstorming. Imagine you're trying to come up with a solution to a problem at work. You wouldn't say, I thought of a solution. You'd say, I came up with a solution. It's much more casual and effortless.
And it's not just about solving problems. You can come up with ideas, plans, or even jokes. It's used in all sorts of creative thinking situations. Like if you're making plans with friends, you might say, I came up with a great idea for our trip.
I love that. It makes it sound so much more laid back, like you just thought of it off the top of your head. It's a perfect example of how phrasal verbs make English sound more natural. All right, guys, we're almost there. Now let's dive into keep up with. This one's super useful and sounds way more natural than saying stay updated or remain informed about.
Oh, definitely. Keep up with is what native speakers say all the time when they want to talk about staying on top of something like the news, trends, or even your friends' lives. It's much more relaxed than stay updated.
Like if you're trying to keep track of the latest tech trends, you might say, I try to keep up with the newest gadgets. But if you say, I stay updated about the newest gadgets, it sounds a bit more formal.
Yeah, it does. And it's not just about information. It can also mean physically keeping the same pace as someone, like, I had to really keep up with my friend during our run yesterday. You're maintaining the same speed.
I love that. So it's kind of like when you're racing to stay in the game. Whether it's with information or speed, you're just trying to keep up without falling behind.
And the interesting part is how keep up with has so many meanings. You could be keeping up with someone's life, like, I need to keep up with my friend's wedding plans, or keeping up with fast-changing news, like we mentioned.
Yep. And it's also related to phrases like fall behind or catch up. If you're not keeping up with something, you might fall behind. And if you've fallen behind, you'll need to catch up.
Ooh, that's a good point. So if you're struggling to keep up with something, you're basically lagging behind. But if you catch up, you're getting back in the game.
So next time, instead of saying, I stay updated with the news, just go with I keep up with the news. It's smoother and sounds much more native.
Totally. And when it comes to trends or fast-moving topics, keep up with is your best friend. You'll sound so much more fluent using it. Now let's wrap things up with get over. This one's pretty interesting because even though it sounds simple, it's actually used in a lot of emotional situations. It's a common one, but many non-natives still get confused and say recover from or overcome.
Those sound a bit too formal for casual conversation. Like instead of saying, I recovered from my breakup, it's much more natural to say, I finally got over my breakup. It's less stiff and more in line with how we speak in everyday life.
Right. And get over is often used for emotional situations, not just physical recovery. So when you say, I need to get over this disappointment, it's not just about getting better physically, it's more about emotional healing.
Yep, it's like that emotional recovery when you're trying to bounce back from something hard, whether it's a loss or a stressful situation. Getting over something means you're moving past the emotional impact.
And this one's different from overcome, which sounds a bit more intense. Get over is more relaxed and about accepting something and letting go.
Like you could say, it took me a while to get over my cold, but you wouldn't say overcome in that case. So remember, get over is your go-to for emotional healing, not just physical recovery. Don't let formal words like overcome steal the show. Just get over it.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. We've covered some really useful phrasal verbs that'll make your English sound much more natural. And hey, if you liked today's episode and want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit that like button and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks. for listening, and we'll see you next time with more phrasal verbs.
Take care. See you.